I'm Daniel Sloan, and the day we tried to bury my mother was the day a kid I didn't know grabbed the whole world by the collar and made it listen under a white funeral tent in Chicago, with lilies choking the air and cameras peeking from the sidewalk. A tiny voice cut through the pastor's prayer like a bell. "His mother is still alive," she said, steady as a surgeon, and for a beat. Nobody breathed. Not the society friends. Not the board members. Not me with a starched handkerchief balled in my fist. Because that was the last thing keeping me from falling apart. The girl's name was Zuri, 7 years old, yellow cardigan, braids sharp as ink lines. She pressed her palm to the black and gold casket and said, "She's warm, check her hand, and maybe you've been in a room where truth shows up in shoes too small to touch the floor. It makes people nervous, you know what I mean." And right on cue, Rafe Mercer stepped into the aisle like a man who's practiced walking into spotlights. Gray suit, calm smile that said, "I own the scene. Continue the service," he told the pastor. Then he turned to me with this weird pity, "Daniel, I didn't want it to come out like this. I'm not just your mother's lieutenant. I'm her firstborn." The tent gasped. A lawyer slid forward with papers and seals and a voice that could narrate a storm. By instruction of the late Mrs. Sloan, the estate and majority shares transfer to Mr. Rafe Mercer. Cameras leaned in like vultures that learned manners, and I felt 12 again, watching oak doors close and my name left out in the hallway. Zuri didn't blink. "She didn't leave you anything because she isn't gone," she said. And then we all heard it, a cough so faint it could have been the wind, but the attendants froze and I was at the casket before my brain caught up with my body. "Open it," I said, not a shout. Just the first honest order I'd given myself all year, Rafe snapped. "No." The pastor's Bible slid from his hands. The latch clicked, the lid rose, and my mother's lips parted like a stubborn door, and air came back into the world. On a thin rattle, people screamed, crossed themselves, fumbled phones. I didn't move because if I moved, I might break. Then the training kicked in. "Clear space, call 911, breathe." Zuri never let go of the rail. She whispered to my mother, like they were the only two people under that tent. "I told you they'd hear you, Saint." Augustine Medical looked like a newsroom. By the time we got there, money buys privacy until it doesn't. We pushed through a gauntlet of mics and eyes. My mother went to a private floor that wasn't private at all. Machines ticked off her fragile breaths, and I finally looked at the kid who had broken the spell. "You believed me, right?" she asked, chin up, like a question was a dare I didn't answer. Because I didn't believe anyone yet, I believed the cough. Rafe hit the networks before dinner. Calm suit, careful sorrow. He said it was theater by a son who couldn't let go, he suggested. The girl was coached that Sloan Harbor Group needed stability. And he said stability, like a man selling people their own fear. I sat in a hard chair outside the ICU and watched strangers tell my story into cameras. Zuri sat swinging her legs. "Lies are loud," she said. "Truth doesn't have to shout. But sometimes it should." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "You always talk like a tiny therapist," I asked. She met my eyes without flinching. "Only when grown-ups forget how to listen." We recorded 1 minute in my mother's room, not a circus, just a phone, a nurse. Zuri on one side and me on the other. "Mom," I whispered. "If you have one sentence, say it." She slid the oxygen mask aside with fingers that still felt like home. "I am alive," she rasped. Then the mask went back and the nurse shooed us out. We posted the clip, and within an hour, Rafe's lawyers were calling it staged. Within 2 hours, 2 men with bad badges tried to push past security. I am not a fighter, I hire them. But that night, I became one. The water cooler lost the fight. The intruders lost the hallway. The police took statements while my hands shook like I'd swallowed a live wire. The next morning, a petition hit like ice water. Emergency guardianship claims my mother was incompetent, that I was manipulating her for control, the kind of legal prose that tries to make your guts look like math. Evelyn Park, my attorney, looked me in the eye. "We can win, but the judge won't care about your last name." Good, I thought, because neither did I anymore. Courtrooms smell like polished wood, and consequence, Rafe's lawyer painted a picture of chaos and denial. He mentioned Zuri like a prop, a child, Your Honor folded into a spectacle. Evelyn didn't object. She stood and called Zuri tiny shoes, steady chin, hand on the Bible like it meant what it says. "What did you see?" Evelyn asked. And Zuri looked straight at the judge, not at me, not at the cameras. I put my hand on the casket. It was warm. I watched her chest move. I heard a cough. "If you think your mom might be breathing, you have to check. Wouldn't you?" The room sagged an inch. The judge's eyes did that human thing. And when I testified, I didn't pretend to be perfect. I told them how I failed for 30 seconds at that funeral, because I wanted order more than truth, how 2 men tried the hospital door, how a kid taught me what courage sounds like. The ruling, cut clean, petition denied. The court recognized my mother's awareness, guardianship inappropriate. Rafe's jaw flexed like a fist he couldn't unclench. Then came the part people don't movie gloss, the boardroom 40 floors up, with the lake winking like it knew something. Rafe called an emergency shareholder meeting and sold stability. He glanced at Zuri and let the room chuckle. "And certainly not a child," he said. I stood because sitting felt like agreeing. Calm built on lies is rot. I told them you saw a resurrection. You saw 2 men try to finish what the ground couldn't. If you want an empire of spin, vote for him. If you want a company that can survive the worst Sunday of my life and choose right on Monday, vote for me. Votes hit the screen like rain, then steadied majority for me as acting CEO. Rafe stripped of authority, pending review. His palm slammed the table. The mask finally slid. "She promised me it was mine," he hissed. And I saw it, not just greed, hunger dressed as love, the most dangerous kind. We needed daylight, not velvet ropes, so we set a podium on the plaza and put the city at our backs. Screens lit with a live feed from my mother's room, pale robe, fierce eyes. I said one thing into the mic you gathered for a funeral. "You're going to get the truth," and then my mother spoke so soft. The plaza leaned in. "I am alive. I was betrayed by someone I trusted. Do not bury the truth." With me, the sound that followed wasn't applause. It was a whole crowd exhaling. And right then, Rafe pushed through the barricade with loyalists and a wild look that didn't care about optics anymore. "Lies," he shouted. "She promised me everything. You stole it." Guards held him, cameras loved him. I didn't take the bait. "Hear what he believes." I told the city, "That's not leadership. That's hunger." And Zuri, without a cue, stepped forward, voice small and steady. "You can't take love by force, and you can't keep the truth under a lid forever. It always breathes." The plaza went quiet, like truth had walked in wearing sneakers. Back at the hospital, my mother squeezed my hand, looked at Zuri like she'd been waiting to see her all her life. "You saved me," she whispered. Zuri shook her head. Said what was true, and maybe that's the part I keep replaying at 2 a.m. Not the courtroom, not the vote, but the moment a kid taught a man with a corner office how to listen. Yeah, that happened. We're not at happily ever after. Rafe is out on bond. Podcasts are arguing whether a staged death could be a corporate strategy. Some folks will always prefer a conspiracy to a cough stock. Does what stock does. The war moved from microphones to paperwork, which is probably where truth likes to live anyway, in boring rooms where nobody can grandstand. And at night, when the city turns on its little squares of light and the sirens soften into distance, I sit by the window and think about every time I kept quiet, to be palatable about how that politeness almost put my mother in the ground. And I ask myself the only question that matters now: will I choose truth when it costs me comfort? Will I stop a funeral? Will I listen to a child? So that's my story, from a tent full of lilies to a plaza full of cameras, from a son who wanted order to a man who picked the thing that breathes. My mother did the truth, did. And a kid named Zuri reminded me, courage doesn't need height or pedigree. It needs a spine and a voice. And here's where I leave it open, because family isn't a verdict. It's a test that repeats. Maybe Rafe gets help, and we build something honest. Maybe he burns his world, trying to prove a promise no judge can validate. I don't control that. I control who I am when it knocks again. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you would have believed the child or finished the prayer. Tell me the worst way you've seen power try to bury a truth it couldn't control. Argue with me about right and wrong, about pride and justice, and the quiet voices we ignore until they save a life. I'll be in the comments.